Hey y'all! Thought we'd pop in today to talk about something that technically keeps me honest and technically proves that maybe I didn't lie last week. I'm talking about working with knit fabrics, especially when it comes to cutting them. Last week, I may have mentioned that I'd be knitting for a few weeks and that my content would be a little bit about knitting, and then, well, somewhere in the middle of the week, the knitting needles got set aside and the knit fabric came out instead. But honestly, I'm calling that a slight shift, not a contradiction. Knitting and knit fabrics are closely related, and if you love fiber, chances are you're bouncing between techniques all the time anyway. Right now, I've got several projects on my plate that all require knit fabric. Things like gowns and cloaks and some wedding-related pieces, and that meant it was time to get serious about handling knits properly again. And one of the very first moments where knit fabric can either behave beautifully or cause absolute chaos is when you cut it. Cutting knit fabric, it sounds simple, it looks simple, and yet it's one of the most common places where things go absolutely sideways, especially if you're used to working with woven fabric or cross-stitch fabric or even yarn-based project where structure behaves very differently. Knits have their own rules, and if you ignore them, they will make you pay for it later, I promise. So one of the first steps, though not the very first step, is cutting out your pattern pieces. If you're using a commercial pattern, this is where accuracy really starts to matter. With knit fabrics, accuracy at the cutting stage affects everything downstream. It affects the fit, the drape, seam behavior, even how long the finished piece lasts. When you're laying out your pattern pieces on knit fabric, you'll want to follow any instructions that say with nap or with direction. And I know the temptation here. I know how easy it is to look at a layout and think, I can squeeze this in better. Or I'll flip this piece of fabric or this piece of pattern to save time. This isn't the time to get creative. I'm all about creativity. But this isn't the time. Okay? If you're using a commercial pattern, lay it out the way it tells you. These layouts exist for a reason, especially with knits that have texture or pile or directional sheen. Fabrics like velour, velvet knits, or anything with a brushed surface can catch light differently depending on the direction. If one sleeve is cut upside down relative to the other, it's going to show, and not in a subtle way. You don't want your garment looking odd. And yes, odd is the right word here. Odd, mismatched, and unintentionally silly. And once you cut that fabric, there's no fixing it. So take the time, lay it out the correct way. Yes, there is a correct way in this matter. So once the pattern pieces are laid out correctly, the next thing that matters is what you're cutting with. Knit fabric is much more sensitive to dull tools than woven fabric. A dull blade doesn't just cut poorly. It pulls, it stretches, and it distorts the fabric as it goes. Ideally, this is where a rotary cutter with a really fresh blade really shines. A brand new blade glides cleanly through knit fabric and minimizes the chance of snagging or bunching. If you prefer scissors, that's fine too, but they need to be extremely sharp. Honestly, practically new is best if you're working with knit fabrics. What you want to avoid at all costs are burrs, nicks, or drags along that cutting edge. Knit fabric will find those imperfections immediately and amplify them. Instead of a clean cut, you'll get stretched edges and uneven lines, or that subtle ripple that doesn't look like a problem until you try to sew it later, and then it's a big problem. And now we come to the part that trips up almost everyone at least once: stretching the fabric while cutting. If you're used to woven fabrics, you've probably been trained to keep the fabric taut so that you get clean, accurate lines. That rule does not apply here. Knit fabrics do not want to be held taut. Knit fabrics want to stretch. And if you stretch it while cutting, you're literally changing the shape of your pattern piece without realizing. So don't stretch or pull on the fabric while you're cutting. This is one of those mistakes that doesn't show up immediately. Everything looks fine on the table. Then you go to sew and suddenly seams don't match. Edges wave. And pieces that should be identical are somehow not. The best approach when cutting knits is to actually touch the fabric as little as possible. Let it rest naturally on your cutting surface. Smooth it gently if needed, but don't pull, don't tug, don't try to help it behave. If you're using a rotary cutter, well, this becomes easier because the fabric stays flat while the blade moves, instead of the fabric being lifted and manipulated by scissors. If you're using scissors, take extra care to lift only the blade, not the fabric itself. Slide that blade under there. Gentle, 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 gentle. Don't lift that fabric. Another thing that helps tremendously is making sure your cutting surface is fully supporting the fabric. Hanging fabric introduces gravity into the equation, and gravity plus stretch equals distortion. If the fabric is heavy or very drapey, make sure it's fully supported before you cut. This advice applies whether you're sewing garments, making accessories, or even cutting knit fabrics for mixed media fiber projects. If you're someone who knits, crochets, or cross stitches, you already understand how much structure matters in fiber. Knit fabric just expresses that truth in a different way. Think of it like this. Every stitch in knit fabric is interconnected. When you pull on one area, the entire structure responds. That's part of what makes knits comfortable and beautiful, but it's also why they demand respect at the cutting stage. Taking a few extra minutes here saves hours later. It saves frustration. It saves recutting. And in some cases, it saves expensive fabric that you can't easily replace. So if you take nothing else from today, remember this. Follow the pattern layout exactly. Use sharp tools, and never stretch knit fabric while cutting. These 3 things alone will dramatically improve your results. Well, that's my tip of the week. Who knows what my tip will be for next week? If I'm still working with knits, it'll probably still be about knit fabrics, and if not, well, I change projects a lot, so you'll just have to tune in to find out. Well, y'all, that's about it. Let me know in the comments what kind of fiber projects you're working on right now and whether knits are something you love or something that intimidates you. Happy stitching!